From the makers of vet-recommended Greenie's dental treats comes an easy way to support your dog's wellness. Greenie's Smart Essentials dry food delivers complete balanced nutrition with science-backed recipes. Greenie's supplements, developed by a team of PhD animal nutritionists, offers options to help support healthy joints, digestion, and more. Whether it's mealtime or mobility support, Greenie's helps you care for your dog from the inside out. Learn more at greenies.com.
This is Veterinary Vertex, a podcast of the AVMA journals. In this episode, we discuss how most, but not all, clinical veterinary journals have improved publication speed of research articles with our guest, Mark Rishniw.
Welcome, listeners. I'm Editor-in-Chief Lisa Fortier, and I'm joined by Sarah Wright. Mark, my friend and colleague of Cornell for 30 plus years, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy biking and working schedule to be with us here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Lisa and Sarah.
All right, let's dive right in. So, Mark, your JAVMA article discusses how most clinical veterinary journals improve process time over the last 6 years. Please share with our listeners the background on this article.
Yeah, with pleasure. So about 6 or 7 years ago, a colleague of mine, Pete White, who's a retired emeritus professor at Cornell, and I started to look into the publication speeds of journals. And it was prompted somewhat facetiously by the observation that JAVMA would take about 2 years from the time you submitted till the time the article appeared in print, to the point where we used to think that the little cross superscript next to somebody's name meant that they were posthumous authors because they died waiting for their article to appear. But turns out that wasn't quite the case, but not far off it. So we looked at who's doing what and how well are they doing it? Are there journals that seem to be on top of the game? Are there not? It had been done in medicine, in the medical and scientific, other basic scientific literature a little bit. And there was a website that I found that where somebody had plotted this over the decades, looking at publication speeds. And so we thought, well, let's look at veterinary journals and just see how they rank against others. So that was the impetus for the first paper. It actually never got published. But then through some email correspondence with another colleague more recently, it led me to say, well, I can repeat this to see if that claim of that colleague was true or not, that they claimed that they were on average on par with every other veterinary journal. And I thought, well, we've got the data, we can compare and we can look to see if journals have improved, worsened, stayed the same, what's happened, and give people another benchmark of clinical journals.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Mark, we were talking a little bit about my career path before we jumped on to this podcast episode and how it came from like a kind of clinical zoo aquarium background to this role in scholarly publishing. And even as a student, I remember thinking knowing it was long publication times, not somewhere you really want to submit. So it's been a real pleasure to work with Lisa to really turn things around and advance veterinary medicine too, and share and better communicate authors' findings as well.
Yeah, and it was our observation that JAVMA had done a really good job in the last 2 years of dramatically improving publication speeds. The original work generally suggested that review times are immutable. It takes about 6 months from the time you first submit to the time it gets accepted, give or take a month or two, but generally somewhere in that range for that first part of a processing, and that you couldn't change that. And then the rest of it was the processing time that the journal takes then to publish the article once it's been submitted and accepted. And again, with the improvements in publication and online, getting manuscripts online, JAVMA was stalled for quite a while in an old model that was no longer really applicable. And so I think that was what we found mostly, although surprisingly, it was actually the review time also that dramatically improved with certain journals.
There were less than 100 days submission and publication now consistently, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. When most of the journals we've looked at are closer to, I would say, 8 to 9 months. So it's not bad, but it's not brilliant.
Yeah, and sometimes I think it's really important to keep pointing out that we have a robust peer review as well.
Right.
When I used to go and say, ooh, this is our time to publication, people were like, yeah, that might not want to be your biggest bragging point right now. Like, we're author friendly, reviewer friendly, and lots of other things. So Actually, that article that Mark was talking about was one of the pieces of information I brought forth in my interview to the AVMA for the job. And I was like, here's the evidence on how far behind JAVMA and AJVR are.
Yeah, and there was one other journal, the Journal of Veterinary Emergency and Critical Care, um, which was on par with JAVMA of the past, and somewhat disappointingly, even though we alerted the editor-in-chief of that 7 years ago, um, no changes have substantially happened with that journal. And, Pete White and I used to joke that, for a journal that concerned with emergency and critical care, it's clearly not an emergency to publish any information to people. So, yeah, we're not embarrassed to shame some of these editors into trying to improve their game. If it works, everybody benefits. And I've got no, horse in the race other than just to see people, especially authors, get stuff out in a timely fashion.
Especially if you're trying to credential too. I know that was something I was always looking for when I was trying to publish, is what's going to be fast and good and constructive so I can get this in time for residency, etc.
Absolutely. And the number of downloads we've had and the number of views of our papers, both the first one and the second one. And the first one, we basically advertised it through listservs. It was published into a repository. It was never published formally because the journals we approached said, oh, this is not interesting enough. Suggest that people care about this. They actually are interested in finding journals that are responsive but critical.
So what are some of the important take-home messages from this article?
The things that we noticed is that, as I say, mostly the review time has not changed for most journals. Some got a little better, some got a little worse. I think there were 2 journals that actually had longer review times than they did 7 years ago, which is somewhat surprising. The processing speeds improved considerably because people now can get articles up, and oftentimes in a journal, they'll have an article up within a month of accepting, which is pretty reasonable speed. And so some of them are up within a day. That's pretty outstanding. Some within a week, but generally within a month or so, you can see your article once it's been accepted. The other big thing that we noticed was that there were a small group of journals that have emerged in the interim period that appear to have publication speeds that defy belief in terms of they are outliers from the rest of the field. And for a number of reasons. One, they routinely have submission to publication times of less than 40 days is what our median was, but oftentimes less than a month. And they publish an order of magnitude more articles per year than virtually any other journal. And we figured out that they publish more articles than virtually all of the other journals combined that we looked at. So the question then becomes, how do they find sufficient reviewers, assuming that their rejection rates are similar to other journals and they're equally critical of the submissions that they receive? How do they find qualified reviewers who will do a critical review that quickly? And I don't know. We're not speculating. All we're saying is, if you've got the magic sauce, tell us, because it's something that everybody could do with. If we knew how you were managing to get, between 8,000 and 12,000 reviewers a year, that's incredible. When the journals, my colleague so I'm a veterinary cardiologist by training, and the Journal of Veterinary Cardiology published, I think, less than 100 papers last year, and they claim that they struggle to find reviewers for that journal for just 100 papers. So when you're publishing 3,000 or 4,000 papers a year, how are you finding competent reviewers to do a good job for you when these smaller journals struggle? That was the other big take home. It led to us thinking, well, maybe, there should be some cautionary advice for authors looking for a quick publication. Are you really publishing in a journal that is reputable, or are you going to be suffering later on because, it came out quickly, but nobody believes it, or everybody thinks, well, it just got published in such and such a journal?
Yeah. Oh, really good points. Like finding reviewers is the hardest part, whether you're Nature or JAVMA or any journal. We've done a ton within the submission platform to automate things. Like send you a reminder, go on, move on to the next. And that takes time. It takes a lot of time to get that submission platform up and running. Yeah, really good words of caution for some of the uh, authors that maybe don't know any better.
And I feel for some of the editors and the scientific editors and the editors in chief of some of the smaller journals, because oftentimes it's a part-time job for them. So they're
Yes.
working a full-time academic career, and on top of this, they're going home and dealing with 3 or 4 hours of manuscripts every night if they can, and running and having a family and trying to have a life, and it becomes difficult. I appreciate that. So JAVMA, I think, has a very coveted position of having full-time editorial staff, and a reasonable number of editorial staff that allow you to do this as as a career rather than just as a sideline.
Yeah, very true. And as a result of your article, other editors have reached out to me, and I have the same philosophy that you do. We're all on the same team for the pets. I'm happy to share any tips and tricks. I just recently shared our revision letter that, as you know, has exact examples on how to write a revision in your manuscript, and they're like, "Ooh, thank you for that." Like, I'm happy to share any of that stuff too. We share the same philosophy.
Yeah.
You touched a little bit earlier on the first article on publication speed and then the second one. Was it just like hanging around noodling with Professor Emeritus White that came up with that idea? Or how did that idea spark in your mind in the first place?
I think it was because of something that we tried to submit back in the day to JAVMA and how long it was taking to come out. Um, and so it just becomes a bee in my bonnet, and I start to, like a terrier going down a rabbit hole, and I'm just not going to give up. And so I thought, well, let's just see how other journals do, and it was just just curiosity. So this one was then again sparked by a second journal where I was struggling, where we had a paper that seemed a fairly straightforward manuscript, and it took over a year to go through review with 4 rounds of revisions. It seemed like either the reviewers were stalling us for some sort of political gain, or the editors were just being bogged down and unable to make it an editorial decision that this is enough. It's either we're going to, excuse the French, and I'm not going to say it, or get off the pot. And we'd be happy to cut our losses if that was what it was, but it just kept us dragging out, and each revision took 3 months to come back when it was like, okay, we've addressed these changes. Why can't the reviewer see this in 3 days, say yes, no, done, and move on? So, yeah, that was the frustration. It's all borne out by frustration.
Well, there's no shortage of curiosity in Mark Rishniw. We know that too. Uh, you already described some of the really cool findings, but anytime we do a study, something's like, "Wow, I didn't expect that." What surprised you from looking at the data in this article?
I think it was the small group of, of the super fast journals. Um, Partly I sort of expected, because I'd already published several papers since Lisa had taken over with JAVMA. So I knew that JAVMA had improved dramatically. So part of it was also, uh, you know, highlight. And I also felt that if I can make JAVMA look good, she's going to accept the paper. So there was a selfish interest there.
Maybe.
But yeah, so those were the big things. And then, the expecteds were that online speed, getting from acceptance to online publication, is pretty consistent now, and should have improved the overall time. And it seems to have done that for most journals.
So, Mark, is there anything else in the future, Hopper? So, any other next steps, future research in this topic?
Not on this particular topic at the moment. I, I've always got stuff in the hopper, but I've got, I think, 9 papers published this year so far. So, yeah, there's always stuff going on. This one, we'll let it rest for a bit, and then maybe come back to it. Um, you know, I'm getting to the point where I like looking at things that are somewhat philosophical. Um, but so uh, yeah, it's hard to say, but nothing in this line. People have asked me, "Can you do other journals? Can you do our journal?" And I'm like, "Well, you could do it. The methods are pretty easy. It just requires a lot of grunt work." and a lot of clicking open and closing web pages that have got all the stats there, because you can't download them, as far as I know, in a simple, easily extractable format. So I simply went through page after page, journal after journal, and just noted, copied and pasted their, submission date, their acceptance date, and their first online date, and then collated it all and sorted it, and then started drawing graphs.
We see a similar process with looking at alt metrics, so online attention scores and dimensions, which track citation scores too for several veterinary journals. And yeah, familiar with the process of writing everything
Yeah.
down, but it makes team to help me. So yes. So do you see a role for AI in this area of research?
Honestly, I haven't thought about AI. I mean, it's something that if those data are easily extractable, then AI would make it even easier to do that. If you could write code to go and just, pull data from websites, essentially scraping them. Yeah, so that would certainly be something that could be largely automated and then maintained and updated, essentially at a click of a button. I know nothing about, doing that sort of thing. I have no real coding background, so yeah, but it seems like there's not a lot of interpretive or analytical complexity to what I did. Part of it's also just looking at the data and saying, "Oh, what does it show us?" Which, when I teach students and residents on how to look at data and biostatistics, and the first thing I tell them is, draw a graph and look at it, because something's going to jump out at you, or something you didn't expect will jump out at you, or you'll think of something else, or you'll go, "Why is that value 100-fold bigger than every other one? Oh, somebody misplaced a decimal point."
Very good advice. And for those of you just joining us, we're discussing how most, but not all, clinical veterinary journals have improved publication speed of research articles with our guest, Mark.
Hey, Mark, you just said, which is amazing, 9 articles already this year. You know how to get it done. What advice do you have for people? Take a breath, look at the data. What advice do you have for people on getting across the finish line?
Especially for young authors, I would say, and by the time you've started your experiment, you could probably, or your research study, you could probably have the introduction and the methods written up. You should have probably figured out what results you want to definitely include. So you're not going to preclude the idea that, oh, we found something really interesting, but how are you going to display your results that you've gone in looking for? So that all you have to really do is write the results, write a brief discussion, and put your references in. Um, but and don't leave it till, 3 months before you're set to graduate from your residency.
Yeah, it's always good to get started early, like, methods should be done, right? Like,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, while you're doing the experiment, you know what you're doing. It's the freshest in your mind about what you've just done or what you're going to do. And you can always tweak it, but you should be able to write it all out, because it's almost part of your proposal, right? So if you're getting funding for it, they want to know how you're going to do stuff, and you can set all that out before you even start the experiment.
for sure.
Lisa and I were literally just talking about this because we're submitting a protocol for IRB review. And I was like, hey, look at that. I got the introduction methods basically done for this protocol
Yeah.
review. So.
And also, look, to me, the other thing is, if it's going to involve statistical analyses, meet with a biostatistician, preferably somebody who has clinical experience and understands what you're trying to do, so that you don't end up presenting them with a whole bunch of data saying, "Here, can you fix this for me?" And they have no idea why or what you did. And so having somebody help clarify your project and determine, okay, so this is what you want to do. So these are how we're going to collect the data. This is how we're going to analyze the data, so that you're not trying to figure that all out after the fact and going, "Oh, I should have gotten that. And oh
Right.
man, I should have measured this. And I didn't know that that was important." So
Yep. Meet ahead of time for sure.
yes.
So, Mark, this next set of questions is going to be really important for our listeners. The first one is going to be from the author's perspective. So, what is one piece of information authors should know when choosing a journal for their manuscript submissions?
I would say pick a journal that, well, I couldn't say one thing. I'd say pick a journal that targets your audience most accurately. So find out, who is your paper intended to get at? Is it the specialists in your field? Is it generalists? Is it the general public? Find a journal that will most likely reach that group. And secondly, pick a journal that you believe that you would like to appear in because you consider it reputable. For whatever reason. It could be high prestige. It could be, it's got a long history, a track record. It's, where your mentor had published in or whatever. Don't pick it just because it's really quick or really slow, or, I'm going to get an answer back and it's going to be a yes answer, and all I need to do is pay him several $1,000s.
On the other side of the relationship, what's one thing that readers should know?
Not all journals are created equal.
Drop mic.
Yeah.
Be cautious of the cluster of three.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I have heard anecdotes about at least one of them, and it's not worth repeating these because it is all anecdotal evidence, but I have reason to want to avoid publishing in them, and I don't think we need to anymore. I think there are, especially for clinicians within the javmosphere, there's a word for you, the javmosphere, that there's enough other journals in which you can publish and not be concerned about, the credibility of your work being challenged.
I think that's a good point, Mark. And many of those other journals, other than that cluster of three, are journals of associations or colleges. And,
Yes.
it's nice to support those as well, rather than the ones that are clearly for profit.
Right.
Well, thanks again, Mark. I love hanging out with you and Pete when I can make it in to talk about philosophy and publishing and all these things. And just thanks again for all your work and all the other help that you provide at JAVMA and AJVR.
You're welcome. Thank you, Lisa. I will mention, though, that, Pete's philosophy discussions are nothing like my 4-year-old niece's philosophy question yesterday, which was in the car after picking her up from daycare. Uncle Mark, is infinity a number? Because my friend Lucy says it's a number, but I don't think it's a number.
That's awesome. What was your answer?
I said, it's both a number and not a number.
That's yes. Sometimes with kids, just a one word. Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe. Well, thanks again, Mark. As we wind down, we'd like to ask a little bit of a fun question. I can't wait to hear this
Sure.
answer. What was the first concert you attended?
Yeah, so I thought about this, and I gave you an option of 2. And the reason I thought about it is that I was up at my oldest nieces. So my 4-year-old niece is one half of the family. I've got 2 nieces who are in their 20s now. And one was graduating from UVM a couple of weekends ago. And after going out for dinner after graduation, I was driving her back to her apartment or the house that she stays in. And a song came on the radio, which was David Bowie's something or other from his Serious Moonlight tour, which happened in 1983. And I said to Layla, oh, I went to that concert. That was my first concert I ever went to. And then I realized that's 40 years ago.
That's awesome.
She sort of
Yep.
looked at me and go, who's that guy on the radio? But whatever.
Huey Lewis in the News in 90. Oh,
Oh,
it was the 80s. It was the early 80s.
yeah. Yeah, Huey Lewis would have been early to mid 80s. Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember the concert well because it was at VFL Park, which is a big football stadium in Melbourne. And we'd lined up overnight outside the gate for general admission. We'd already had the tickets, but there was no seating assignment. So you just ran in and found your place as soon as they opened the gates. So first in,
Nice.
first serve. Yeah.
I think I'd actually prefer that over the great Ticketmaster battle nowadays, waking up at 6
Yeah.
a.m. to try to get concert tickets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
There was a lot of beer drunk that night waiting in sleeping bags.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. We appreciate you being here and again for all that you do for our journals. So thank you.
No, thank you guys for inviting me. It's been fun.
And to our listeners, you can read Mark's article in JAVMA. I'm Sarah Wright with Lisa Fortier. Be on the lookout for next week's episode, and don't forget to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you listen to.